Every chosen one must face these dark stages before spiritual awakening. There's something no one tells you when you begin your spiritual journey, not your favorite spiritual influencer, not the books filled with light and love, not even the soft voices in guided meditations. What they forget to say, or maybe what they're afraid to admit, is this: the path of the chosen one doesn't begin with light. It begins in the dark. It begins in chaos. It begins in silence so heavy it makes you think you've lost your way. But that silence, that darkness, that breakdown, it's not the end. It's the initiation. And every chosen one must go through it. You don't get to skip the shadows and fast forward to enlightenment. You earn your light by walking through the parts of yourself you were taught to fear. The parts buried beneath shame, rejection, abandonment, betrayal. The parts that make you question everything: your worth, your purpose, your sanity. And if you're watching this, if you've ever felt like your entire world collapsed right before something important was about to begin, then I want you to understand something deep. This isn't a punishment. This is the process. You're not broken. You're breaking open because the soul can't expand inside the prison of who you used to be.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
The first stage every chosen one faces is the collapse of identity. This is when your old life no longer fits. The job, the relationships, the places you once found comfort, they start to feel hollow. You wake up one day and realize you've been living someone else's dream, checking boxes that never really belong to you. You may still smile, you may still function, but inside something is dying, and it has to. Because the person you've been pretending to be can't carry the weight of your true self. So the universe begins to strip it all away, not to hurt you, but to reveal you. That's when the pain sets in. The confusion, the isolation. You try to hold things together. You try to cling to what's familiar, but the truth is relentless. It claws at your insides. It whispers in your dreams. It shows up in moments of silence when there's no one left to distract you. And then comes the second stage, the void. This is the most misunderstood stage. People think it's depression. They think it's failure. But the void is sacred. It's the space between who you were and who you're becoming. Nothing makes sense here. Time stretches. Your emotions fluctuate wildly. You feel like you're floating in a sea of nothing. But that nothing is everything. It's the soil of your rebirth. Most people run from the void. They numb it, distract it, talk over it. But if you're a chosen one, you don't get to bypass it. You're forced to sit in it, to breathe in it, to listen to the silence until it becomes your teacher. This is where the shadows come alive. All the parts of you you've avoided come to the surface. The rage you've buried, the pain you've denied, the worthlessness you've masked with perfection. It all rises like smoke from a burning house. And you have to sit in the ashes. This is where many give up. They think the darkness means they're failing. But the darkness is the evidence that you're awakening. Because only when you've been truly stripped can you begin to rebuild from truth. And in those moments of despair, when you think no one sees you, no one understands, no one cares, that's when something ancient begins to stir inside you. The third stage begins to emerge, the confrontation. You meet your inner demons. Face to face, no filters, no distractions, just you and your deepest fears. You begin to see how much of your life has been shaped by fear. Fear of rejection, fear of not being enough, fear of being too much. The fear that if people saw the real you, they'd walk away. And maybe they did. Maybe you've already experienced that. Maybe the people you loved most couldn't handle your truth. And that hurts deeply, but it also liberates you. Because once you stop pretending, once you stop performing for love, You start to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. And it's in that remembering that something shifts. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet, subtle, but undeniable. A spark flickers in the darkness, just for a moment. You begin to feel your power, not the external kind that comes from achievements, but the internal kind that comes from surviving yourself. You survived the collapse. You survived the void. You faced the monsters in your mind. And you're still here, breathing, watching, listening. Something in you refuses to die. That something is your soul. And so I ask you, what if everything falling apart was actually falling into place? What if the pain wasn't breaking you but sculpting you? What if the darkness wasn't your enemy, but your womb? What if the void wasn't a punishment but a passage? Would you still resist it? Or would you surrender and let it teach you? Because here's the truth no one wants to say out loud: spiritual awakening is brutal. It's not all light codes and angel numbers. It's crying on the floor at 3 a.m. It's losing everything you thought mattered. It's doubting your own sanity. It's rage. It's grief. It's silence. And then after all of that, it's clarity. It's presence. It's power. But only if you don't give up in the dark. You were never meant to awaken gently. You were meant to rise from the ashes and the fire you're walking through. It's not here to destroy you. It's here to purify you. The spiritual quarantine, why isolation is the gateway to power. There comes a point in every chosen one's journey when the silence becomes deafening. The phone stops ringing. The friends disappear. The support you once relied on vanishes. You wake up one day and realize you're completely alone, not just physically, but energetically. And you start asking yourself, what did I do wrong? Why does it feel like I've been exiled from the world? But I want you to consider something few ever do. What if that isolation is not a punishment but a calling? What if you're not being abandoned, but summoned? We call this phase the spiritual quarantine. It's that sacred yet brutal space where everything external gets stripped away so that everything internal can finally be heard. The opinions, the noise, the distractions, they get removed. Not because the world has turned against you, but because your soul has reached a frequency where the old world can no longer follow. You're not in exile, you're in initiation, and initiations are never crowded. The truth is, you can't awaken in a room full of noise. You can't hear your soul while you're still tuned into the frequency of people who never saw you clearly. That's why the universe pulls you back. It's a divine setup. It takes away the people who validated your false self. It closes the doors that kept you safe in your smallness. It isolates you from the things you thought you needed, not to punish your ego, but to free your essence. Because the power you're about to access requires solitude. In this space, you meet your raw self. There's no performance left, no roles to play, no one to impress, just you, your breath, and the unfiltered mirror of your own consciousness. And that moment is terrifying for most, because without the opinions of others, you're forced to define yourself from the inside out. What do you believe when no one is watching? What do you value when no one is clapping? Who are you when you're not being validated, liked, or supported? That's where the power begins to rise, not in applause, but in clarity. You begin to hear the voice that's been buried beneath years of programming. The voice that says, you were never meant to be like them. You're here to break patterns, to rewrite codes, to rebuild reality. And that voice, that's your soul remembering its mission. But here's the paradox. The deeper your purpose, the longer your isolation may last. Why? Because the universe is not preparing you for a small life. It's preparing you to become a frequency disruptor. And you cannot disrupt what you're still entangled in. You can't elevate the collective if you're still emotionally tethered to the old matrix. So the universe cuts the cords for you. It removes the relationships, the jobs, the environments that keep you energetically anchored to your past self. It clears the path not for comfort, but for consecration. And yes, it hurts. Loneliness is one of the most painful teachers, but it's also one of the most faithful, because loneliness doesn't lie to you. It doesn't flatter your ego. It doesn't let you escape. It forces you to sit with your truth until it becomes the only thing you trust. That's why the chosen ones must go through it, because we're not just here to awaken, we're here to lead. And you can't lead from a place of codependence. You have to lead from wholeness. So if you're in that space right now, if you feel like no one sees you, no one gets you, no one is walking beside you, I want you to know something deeply. You're not lost. You're being refined. You're not being punished. You're being fortified. The silence isn't empty. It's full. Full of codes. Full of clarity. Full of the power you'll need for what's coming next. Ask yourself this: if everything around you had to fall away to reveal your soul's true frequency, would you be willing to let go? Could you choose solitude over safety? Could you choose truth over company? That's the test. That's the gateway. And once you pass through it, something shifts forever. You begin to realize that your power doesn't come from the crowd. It comes from the source within. That you don't need to be understood to be impactful. That your resonance is enough to shift timelines even if no one claps for it. You start to walk differently, speak differently, move differently. Not because you're trying to be someone, but because you finally remember who you are. This is the quarantine before the emergence, the cocoon before the flight. If you're in it, don't rush it. Unnumb it. Don't resist it. Let it shape you. Let it burn away the need to be found, because you were never lost. You were just hidden. Hidden from the world. Hidden from distraction. Hidden from distortion. So that when you finally re-emerge, it will not be as a seeker, but as a signal. The furnace of the soul, facing the ego's last stand before breakthrough. There's a point in every chosen one's path where the silence turns into fire. Not the gentle warmth of healing, but the raging furnace of purification. It's the moment when your ego, the old identity that kept you safe, light, and accepted, realizes it's dying. And it doesn't go quietly. It doesn't surrender with grace. It fights, screams, manipulates, clings. It throws every fear, every doubt, every unhealed wound at you like a storm, trying to pull you back into the past. This is the furnace of the soul, and it's the most sacred battle you will ever fight, not against the world, but within yourself. This is where most people turn back. They've survived the collapse. They've endured the void. They've sat in isolation. But when the ego starts its final rebellion, they mistake it for truth. They think the fear is a sign to stop. They think the pain is a sign they've gone too far. But the truth is, this is the final gate before breakthrough. The ego knows it's losing control, and like a cornered animal, it becomes dangerous. It begins whispering, "You're not ready. You're not worthy. You'll be alone forever. Who do you think you are?" And if you don't recognize that voice as the dying breath of your false self, you'll believe it. You'll shrink back into the illusion. But if you hold steady, if you breathe through the fire without flinching, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see the ego not as evil, but as afraid. You begin to understand that it was only trying to protect you. It built masks to keep you accepted. It built walls to keep you from abandonment. It crafted identities to shield you from judgment. But none of it was real. It was armor. And now, the soul is asking you to take it off, not to leave you exposed, but to reveal your power. This stage hurts because it's a death. But unlike physical death, this one is conscious. You feel every part of the unraveling. You watch your old self disintegrate while your new self is still forming. You're floating in between identities and nothing feels solid. You might cry for no reason, rage out of nowhere. Feel empty even when everything seems fine. That's the fire rearranging your cellular structure. That's your soul reclaiming space inside a body once governed by fear. And during this furnace stage, the tests become sharper. People from your past might return not to reconnect, but to tempt you back into who you were. Opportunities may arise that look like blessings, but carry the frequency of your old patterns. Your mind will try to convince you that the familiar pain is safer than the unknown freedom. This is where discernment becomes your sword. You must learn to recognize the difference between what feels good and what's true, because not everything that comforts you is meant for you anymore. You'll have to release parts of yourself that once felt essential. The version of you that needed to be liked. The version that stayed small to keep the peace. The version that tolerated mistreatment just to feel loved. You'll grieve them, and that grief will feel like betrayal. But it's not betrayal, it's self-resurrection. Because every time you let go of who you're not, you make space for who you really are. And here's the wildest part. No one will see this battle but you. On the outside, you might look fine. You might still go to work, still smile, still post on social media. But inside, your soul is on fire. You're being burned down to your core so that you can rise without the residue of your past. This is the unseen war, the final ego purge, and it's sacred. So I ask you, in this moment of fire, can you stay when everything in you wants to run? Can you love yourself when your ego is screaming that you're unworthy? Can you trust the process even when you don't recognize who you are anymore? That's the test. That's the gateway. And if you walk through it, you'll find something waiting on the other side that no book, no teacher, no guru can give you: embodiment. You won't just talk about awakening, you'll be it. Your presence will shift rooms. Your words will carry codes. Your silence will vibrate with truth. Because you've earned it. You didn't bypass it. You didn't fake it. You faced it. And that makes all the difference. The ego's last stand is brutal, but it's also brief. Once it realizes you're no longer afraid of your own power, it stops fighting. It surrenders. And in that surrender, you reclaim sovereignty over your own life. You stop living for validation. You stop chasing healing. You stop apologizing for your truth. You become the truth. And that is the real awakening, not a moment of bliss, but a moment of clarity so sharp it cuts through illusion like a blade. So if you're in the fire, stay. Don't run. Don't numb. Don't negotiate with the old self. Let it burn. Let it scream. Let it die. Because what's waiting on the other side is not just a new version of you, it's the real you. The one who was never afraid, never lost. Just hidden, waiting for your permission to rise. The birth of the authentic self, becoming the light you were searching for. After the fire, it's quiet again, but it's not the same silence you knew before. This one feels different. It doesn't carry the weight of confusion or the ache of loneliness. It's not the silence of being lost. It's the silence of arrival. You're no longer trying to find yourself. You're no longer reaching outward. You're no longer asking the world who you are, because now you know, not from theory, not from books, but from fire, from collapse, from walking barefoot through the wilderness of your own soul. You've burned through illusion. You've buried the false self, and what's left is real. This is the birth of the authentic self, and it doesn't come with fanfare. No angels sing. No one hands you a certificate. In fact, most people won't even notice it happened. But you will. You'll wake up and realize you're no longer at war with yourself. You'll feel peace in places where there used to be chaos. You'll notice that things that once triggered you no longer touch you, not because you're numb, but because you've outgrown the wound. That's what real healing is. Not perfection, not never feeling pain, but being so aligned with truth that nothing false can stick anymore. You begin to move differently. Not faster, not harder, but with presence. You stop performing. You stop chasing. You stop explaining your existence to people who were never meant to understand it. You realize that your power was never in your ability to convince others, it was in your ability to embody your frequency completely. And in that embodiment, you become the light you were searching for, not the blinding light of performance, but the steady flame of truth, the kind of light that doesn't shout but radiates. Your intuition sharpens. Your voice deepens not in sound but in resonance. Your eyes see more clearly. You're no longer seduced by surface. You begin to hear the energy behind words. You feel the intention behind actions. You walk into a room and feel everything, but you're no longer overwhelmed by it. Because now you know what belongs to you and what doesn't. That's the power of sovereignty. You are no longer porous. You are no longer programmable. You've become untouchable not because you've built walls, but because you've become whole. And from this place, your purpose becomes clear, not as a job title, not as something to sell, but as a frequency you carry into every room you enter. You realize that the mission was never just about you. It was about what you were meant to activate in others. Your healing becomes the permission slip for someone else's breakthrough, not because you preach it, but because you are it. You are the walking evidence that it's possible to die and be reborn in the same lifetime, that it's possible to go through hell and come back holy. So I ask you this, as we close this journey, what would happen if you stopped looking for the light and finally claimed that you are it? What would shift if you stopped asking for permission and started walking as if your frequency was the answer someone else has been praying for? Because it is. You are. You were never meant to fit in. You were meant to awaken others just by being. You were never meant to be saved. You were meant to lead. And now, finally, you can. Not from ego, not from fear, but from embodiment. You've walked through every dark stage. You've faced every shadow. You've lost everything not aligned with your truth. And yet, here you are, still standing, still breathing, more you than you've ever been. This is not the end of your journey, it's the beginning of your real one. The one that starts not from pain or seeking, but from presence. And from here, everything changes. Not because the world changed, but because you did. You are the light. Walk like it.